contest.
That's cash to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
My next guest was the first and remains to this day the only person I've ever had on my show who went to the same college I did, the same year I did, but somehow we didn't meet each other at the time. Annie Duke, the first, and I'm not sure if still only, female World Series of Poker champion, the author of the fabulous book, Thinking in Bets. Hey, good morning, Annie. Thanks for being back with me. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Let me just say, a woman named Barbara Enright won a bracelet before me, and also a woman named Jennifer Herman.
I thought you were the first.
I'm definitely not the first.
All right.
The only.
Not the first story. And hey, remind me, because you didn't win yours at Hold'em. Was it Omaha? What did you win for?
It was Omaha 8 or better, and then I won the Tournament of Champions, which was put on by the World Series of Poker and Hold'em, and obviously like the NBC Heads Up Championship was in Hold'em, and I have more Hold'em titles than I do Omaha 8 or better titles, but I actually like Omaha better.
That Omaha is a crazy game. You've got to be really good at math, probabilities, and there's a lot more to work out. I mean, Hold'em's complicated enough. Omaha's another level.
Yeah, there's a whole. So in Omaha, you the pockets split up, so it changes the math a lot. It's very, very. They don't have it on television because the rules are more complicated than Hold'em, so it's not as easy to understand what's going on. So it doesn't make for a good television game, but it makes for a good poker game.
Excellent. I love it. Okay, I want to talk to you about, well, a lot of things, but I want to start off with what you make of the difference right now, or differences between political polling and political betting. And I don't know how much you're watching the latter, but it's kind of fun. You can't place very large bets, at least in America. You can in England, on American political betting. But what are you seeing in betting markets, and what do you make of it right now?
Yeah, so I think people actually really confuse what a poll is and what a betting market is. So you can think about a poll as an input into a betting market. It's like a piece of data that you would use for a betting market. So a poll is like a mock vote of that day of a certain sample of people. And depending on what your sampling methods are or what your sample size is, it will give you a pretty good view of, if you held a vote on that particular day, how it would break out. A betting market is actually doing a forecast. It's saying, given what we know about the world, how likely do we think on the day that the vote happens that, one candidate will win over the other? So this is where you can see a big difference. Like if I take a poll a year from an election, and the poll says one candidate is 55 and another candidate is 45, probably that's not going to help my forecast very much, because like a year is really, really far away. But if I take a poll 1 minute before the vote, and one candidate is 55 and one candidate is 45, my betting forecast is going to basically have 100% of the people betting on the candidate who's 55%, because that tells us how the vote is probably actually going to go, because we took it a minute before.
Mm-hmm.
So polls are better as data. The closer that you get to the actual vote, the better the sampling is, things like that. So I actually saw an article, like I think it was right after Brexit, where people were saying, oh, the betting markets got it really wrong and the polls got it really right. And I said, they're talking about different things. I don't know exactly what you mean, because the polls, of course, are always closer than the betting markets.
They're always what?
They're always closer than the betting markets. Because you can imagine, like, if I took a poll 1 minute before a vote and it was 52% for, say, one candidate, say Brexit, like Remain was 52% and Leave was 48%. And I took that poll a minute before it happened, Remain would actually come out as almost 100% to win, even though the poll was really close. So they were saying that since the vote was actually really close, the poll was better. Well, of course it was, because the poll was actually a mock vote, not a prediction of who will win.
Right, and some of these betting markets, though, actually most these days, online betting markets, and I guess it's the same when you're at a casino, they are either always or almost always open, so you can trade them in real time. And I'll give you one example that I'd kind of like to get your take on why you think it's setting up this way. 538, for example, has the odds of Democrats taking back the House at something like 80 or 85%. But
right.
Over at a website, predictit.org, where you can bet on this, the betting odds of Democrats taking back the House have been quite steady at almost exactly 2-1. It's 66 cents right now. That's a very, very large difference. And why can you explain that?
Yeah, so forecasts and betting markets are slightly different. So you can think about a betting market as essentially a crowdsource, where I'm trying to bet, but I need someone on the other side to bet against me. And so we're just betting against each other. And what that's telling you is that in order for me to be able to get you to bet against me, I have to give you $2 for every $1 that you're risking if I want to say that the Democrats are going to take the House and to get you to say that they won't. So betting markets can be actually betting markets are really about me betting against you. Now, it gives you a good view of what public opinion is, but it's also affected by things like where the betting market is occurring. So, for example, the betting markets for Brexit showed Remain as an incredibly heavy favorite. But the reason for that was that most of the betting was occurring in London, where everybody in London was going to vote Remain. So if two Londoners are voting against each other, then I have to offer you way more money in order to get you to actually take the side of Leave. Because we both live in London, and so everybody around us we think is going to vote for Remain, and so we may be overestimating the chance that Remain would win. So you can think about it as a market in that way, that it has to do with people betting against each other. So what 538 is doing is saying, given what we know about all of the local polling, all of the data, how predictive polls have been in the past, what the generic vote says about how it's going to shake out, and then including things like gerrymandering and whatnot, they're creating a mathematical model that's neutral to where you live in terms of who's actually going to win that bet. So in this case, 538 is probably going to end up being more accurate of a prediction than the betting market is, just because the betting market is a little bit swung around by who happens to be betting against each other.
Right,
but
so there could be lots of Republicans.
Than just asking somebody's opinion. Betting markets will be more accurate. And if you had a betting market that was sampling perfectly across society where everybody had equal skin, it should come out actually pretty similar to a forecast.
Okay, so the betting market might just have a lot of Republicans who don't trust polls because the polls said Donald Trump wouldn't win, and therefore they're going to bet that Republicans keep the House. Right,
exactly. That's exactly right. And what you see with things like betting markets is that when it's something that can be easily crowdsourced, like, for example, let's bet on what the population of London is. People have pretty good, assuming you don't have Google, people have pretty good knowledge of that. But if you were to ask Americans what's the population of, Malaysia, Americans wouldn't be particularly good at that. You would want to get a little bit more expertise in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you look at what the forecast is saying on 538, there's a lot of expertise in there. Of course, the people are the ones who are voting, which is why a forecast in this case is revealing. But you can see that both are pretty heavily over towards the Democrats taking the House. By the way, the opposite for the Democrats taking the Senate. Neither of them are particularly bullish on that one.
Right. And I wonder, without wanting to get too far into Danny Kahneman, if there's any anchoring here, along the lines of if someone were to ask you, what's the population of London, and just ask that, then you might get a range of answers. But if you ask people, is the population of London greater or less than 10 million people, when it's less, you might bias people to answer with higher numbers than they otherwise would. I wonder if any of that goes on in our political stuff.
Oh, I think for sure it does. I mean, anchoring is just a really well-known effect. So, anchoring and framing, I think, are two of the biggest ones. You can frame something as taking something away. You can frame something as giving something back. And depending on how you frame it, you get really different answers. Like, if I say to you there's a cancer treatment and, let's say there's a cancer where it's totally fatal, like for sure fatal, and I have a treatment where 600 people will live, you'll really like the treatment. But if I say to you I have a treatment where 400 people will die, you'll really hate the treatment. Of course, I've just told you the exact same information.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk more about the way the world is operating right now. And you and I were talking offline about how much more tribal it seems like our politics. I should take away "it seems." How much more tribal our politics has become. What are you thinking about that, especially from the perspective of someone who thinks about the world the way you do?
Yeah, so people should go check out. John Haidt has actually been writing a lot about this, and a guy named Dave Van Bavel also. Actually, they're both at NYU, interestingly enough. But there's just been a lot of stuff written recently about what's happening in terms of our tribal politics. Actually, you sent me a piece from David Brooks, also sort of wrote on a survey that was done. And what they're finding is that there's definitely increasing polarization, but there's a really, really disturbing trend, which is that there's more and more we're defining our tribe by the people that we hate, as opposed to that we like what our tribe is doing. It's about hating the other tribe. And what's going on with that? So as we have increased polarization, we have increased sort of definition of I define myself by what I hate. And then what goes along with that is that more and more people are endorsing that the ends justify the means. In other words, in order to get what I want, in order to get what my tribe wants, I'm willing to do a whole bunch of kind of iffy things in order to make sure that I get there, because that stops the people that I hate from getting what they want. And so therefore that's justified. And I think that we can definitely see that in our politics, and it's really driving us apart. And then there's also been this really great work recently looking at our ability to see the faults in arguments that belong to ourselves or our tribe. So from our perspective, if I write solutions to brain teasers, and then you later show me my own solutions, I'll be very critical of them if I don't know they were mine, right? So I'm much more critical of them if I think they were somebody else's than my own. And we can then see that on the tribal level, which is when you present people arguments that are from their own political party, they don't really parse it very well. But if you show them the same arguments and they're from out of party, they're very, very critical of it. So we're really much better at reasoning in terms of what the flaws of an argument are, why it's not okay, why those aren't good means to an end, so on and so forth, when we're looking at the other party than our own.
Our very special guest is Annie Duke. Her website, annieduke.com. Her wonderful book, Thinking in Bets, Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All the Facts. And in a minute or two, we'll get to your other project that you have going on. Do you think that this trend towards, which I agree with the way you described it, do you think this trend towards increasing tribalism is temporary? And if not, what could reverse it?
So, I mean, I think part of the problem is that tribe has a lot of uses, right? So if you think about evolving human beings with no sharp claws and no sharp teeth, tribes were defined by kinship. And so, you would band together in small groups that protected your own genes against people who were trying to take your resources. So that idea of, us versus them was actually really useful, particularly in terms of taking care of some of our own physical inadequacies in comparison to other animals, right? So we have this very natural tribal instinct. You can see it neurologically. That's a lot of what Dave Van Bavel does. So I don't think it's going to go away. And I think that one of the problems is that social media really exacerbates it. So it used to be that you lived in your neighborhood and you had your neighbors, and they may or may not believe certain things that you do, but you kind of had to get along with them. Now you can go find people who agree with you online. The social websites are making sure they're curating information that's within tribe, right? You get to see things that you like. That's how the algorithm.
That's right. And even if the platform isn't doing it, you have a self-selected group of people who follow you. I find, my followers are much more right of center than the average American, and I have to go seek liberal opinions on Twitter if I really want them. I've got about 90 seconds left. So very quickly, Annie, tell us about howidecide.org.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a nonprofit that I co-founded actually to try to resolve some of these problems. So I think that part of the problem that we have is that we aren't taught how to make decisions. We aren't taught critical thinking skills. I mean, when you were in middle school or elementary school, did anybody ever say to you, like, here's how you make a decision?
No.
This is the process. Right. Nobody ever learns that. Instead, we're learning how to do calculus. I'm not sure why. So what we're trying to do as an organization is get people to start bringing education about how to make a decision, how to think probabilistically, how to think about what does 35% mean, what are your options, what are your values, what's a habit, all these things that we're not teaching our kids. We're trying to get those into school. And if you think about it, that's exactly the kind of stuff that's going to help you, like, spot fake news, for example.
That's right. Yeah.
You spot political, arguments that are illogical but targeting that tribal part of your brain.
So I need to get one last question in, and I want folks to go check out howidecide.org. I've literally got 20 seconds, Annie. Sock, shoe, shoe, or sock, shoe, shoe?
Sock, shoe, shoe.
Excellent. Producer Shannon is disappointed once again, but that is the right answer. Annie Duke, thank you so much for being here. Everyone go read her book, Thinking in Bets, and check out howidecide.org. We'll talk to you again, Annie. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye. We'll be right back on The Ross Kaminsky Show.
This report is sponsored by Sherwin-Williams.
Cluttered highways and a bunch of problems. Nissan Intelligent Mobility can reroute you around any backups. I-25 coming out of Larkspur, just a tough drive. An accident northbound I-25 up near Toma Road, exit 174, miles of backups there. I-25 in or out of downtown, heavy traffic. An accident northbound I-25 near 8th Avenue. And up in Broomfield, southbound I-25 approaching Highway 7. Boulder Turnpike jammed up. A 6-car crashed westbound Highway 36 at Sheridan, now on the shoulder. Denver's forecast, it'll be sunny but windy today, high near 55. Overnight, low at 34, low 60s tomorrow. Right now, 37 degrees. With the traffic and weather, I'm Susan Thielen, 630 KHOW.
Now's the perfect time to bring color home.